Meeting to order. And Deanne.
All members of the subcommittee are present, and there are no public comments tonight.
All right, that moves us to C1.
All right, thank you, Trustee Segura. So the first item for C1 is the election of the committee chair for the Audit and Finance Subcommittee of the Board of Trustees. So that is a board process and procedure. Deanne, if you have any guidance for the committee members. If not, this really is a process where you nominate and then there's a second and then discussion if need be, and Ms. Viceta will call the question for a vote.
So just the nomination of the chair, correct?
That is correct, of the subcommittee.
Okay.
I'll nominate myself.
Oh, are you gonna be there?
Yeah. Well, for,
If you
yeah.
want,
Did you want a chair?
yeah, I'd like to do that.
Okay, I'm good with that.
All right, cool.
That's great. That's a good idea. I was actually thinking of that earlier today.
Okay, good.
So I unnominate myself.
Okay, you withdraw your nomination.
I withdraw it, and then I nominate
Ms. Emerald?
Ms. Emerald as chair.
Okay. Do you all agree? Is there any unanimous vote? Anybody opposed? Any discussion? Okay, then, congratulations.
By acclamation.
Well, thank you so much.
It's
I
all,
appreciate that, and I'll
yes.
serve you well.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Okay, so then we can move on to item C2, which is a number of different audits. And for C2A, 2324 audit, and there's a number of audits here, includes the bond as well. I'll ask Dr. Salkel to introduce this item, and I believe our auditors are in the room. Dr. Salkel.
Thank you, Dr. Gearing. Good afternoon to the committee. We've got Kevin Smith and Elizabeth Sav here with the Crow team. They're going to be highlighting our upcoming audit now for the 23-24 year. In the documents there, it includes their client service plan, so they'll highlight those pieces there, and the specific engagements related to our district-wide audit, as well as the bond performance and financial audits for each of our respective bond issuance or bond measures. So they will go through those details and solicit if there's any feedback as we start that work. We will commence in May timeframe with our ASB and our attendance accounting work at our school sites. And then over the summer and also then into the fall in October, that's when we're going to do the district-wide audits. So that kind of starts to lay the timeline of the work ahead, ultimately to bring forward to this committee in December a draft of the audited financial statements, and then to our board by the December 15th. So it's kind of that roadmap that they're going to highlight. So I will hand over to Mr. Smith.
Madam Chair, it is an honor to be here tonight. I nominated myself to start the presentation, but now that I know that we can unnominate ourselves, it's our pleasure to be here today, and Dr. Salkel did a tremendous job of kind of teeing it up, and I think the really good news is we have a road plan. We don't anticipate any deviations from that road plan, which is, it's a far cry from where we might have been 5 years ago, and that's the positive news. As we walked in, somebody asked, is this going to be an exciting meeting? And we said, no, it's not, and that's exactly the way that you want it to be.
Yes, it is.
So very quickly, client service, and we'll get into what we actually do, but client service is very important to us. It is sometimes we have to deliver bad news. It's what you engage us to do. But we try to work with management to ensure that they agree with our findings and that we provide solutions to those findings as well. So everything that we do is really dedicated to working with management and working for the board and this committee. So we want to walk through our client service plan. We think of it as a working document. It kind of guides everything that we will be doing between now and December. Next page. So a couple of key fun points here. Your engagement team is very consistent with what we've had in the past. Some of our best experts across the firm as it relates to K through 12 and LEAs are assigned to this engagement. I am excited and honored to say that I get to kind of take a step back in this year's engagement because effective April 1st, Elizabeth Sav is a new partner of mine within the firm. So want to say congratulations to her in a public setting, and we're going to be bringing her forward to take a much more active and lead role on this engagement, and she's going to serve you very, very well. Outside of that, everything is consistent. We are supported by technical advisory partner Christine Torres, as well as our national office partner Tony Boris. He actually sits on the AICPA state and local government expert panel. So everything that the GASB is doing or the AICPA is doing, Tony has an upfront window to that as it occurs. Charles will be continuing in his role as senior manager on the bond audits. Again, we try to separate the financial statement versus just the bond and the performance audits. And Tori will be continuing as the lead in charge on a daily basis. And we're also supported by 2 IT resources because IT is a critical component of internal control and will continue to be so. So again, we do focus on client experience. We really try to do that through a couple ways that we try to invest in. We make sure that we have up-to-date thought leadership that's provided to both management as well as the board. We've invested heavily within technology to ensure as effective and efficient to audit as possible. At the conclusion of this engagement, we will provide a survey to management and say, tell us what we did right, tell us what we did wrong, just like we get to point out things, weaknesses within your internal control structure. You guys get to point out whether or not we have any hiccups in our client service delivery aspects, and we try to take those very seriously and address those in a given year. So very quickly, we'll dive more into the meat of the engagement. So the services and deliverables, and this again is where Dr. Sockel did a tremendous job in kind of teeing it up. We have, in my mind, several distinct engagements that we're asked to perform. We perform the external audit of the district-wide financial statements. We also look at compliance requirements, whether that be at the federal level or at the state level. And then we also look at both the Propo and the Measure DD bond fund audits, both from a financial statement and a performance. These are all consistent with the previous year. If you'll remember last year, there was a couple new bond audits and performed. This is going to be the same consistency with the previous year. I nominate myself to go sit down.
All right.
For today only.
For today. Well, thank you, everyone. So here we have the timeline that shows you our order of events, or at least the plan. You'll notice there at the top, the second line there, Infor Financial System Conversion Assessment. So that's a new item this year as you implemented Infor, as we've anticipated that implementation to take place. And so that started July 1, 2023. And so our IT professionals will be partnering with us in April and meeting with your team to go through that testing of that to make sure that all of the data converted over properly so that we can start the audit fresh. First interim, we will be visiting these sites that are listed here, 2 middle schools, 3 high schools, and then your continuation school, Palomar, that gets selected every year because it's your only continuation. Lucky them. So we will be going through attendance testing and ASB assessments over those procedures in May. The second interim fieldwork will be in August, where we go through your internal controls. We go through the bulk of your state compliance as well as the bulk of your federal compliance testing. And then year end in October, we will take your unaudited actuals, put those into our risk assessment, and start the actual financial statement testing over your different line items, as well as for Propo and Measure DD. And then we have the list here of the different meetings that we'll be attending and our plan to finalize by December 15th. All right. Moving to the next page. So our audit planning communications, these are standard required communications that we are required to bring to those charged with governments or the audit committee, just to provide a reminder and put into writing how we conduct an audit, what are our risk assessment procedures, materiality, those types of things. So here we'll just confirm for you we follow government auditing standards as we approach, as you are a governmental entity that has its own line of requirements that we must follow. Scroll down, please. Thank you. We do everything on a test basis and examination. We do not look at 100% of your transactions. We do sampling. That would not be very fun. So we do sampling. We use risk assessment on a continual basis, and we use materiality. We want to continue down. All right, here. So risk assessment, if you want to just go down to the graphic, yeah. So risk assessment is a continuous process. So like Kevin said, we come into this with a plan, and our anticipation is that we won't need to deviate from that plan, but risk assessment is a continual process of what we may find. So if we were to come across an issue, maybe during our interim field work, we would need to shift and change our testing plan accordingly. So this is just to give you insight into how we go about. We don't just set out a plan and just go with it. We make sure that we are ebbing and flowing with what we are actually finding. As well as you guys are part of that risk assessment process. So you can see there's a circle for you where we're meeting with you to ask you, are there fraud concerns that you may have? Are there issues that keep you up at night that you would like to bring to our attention? That's really important for us, and we solicit that feedback. Okay, go ahead to the next page. All right, so the top paragraph talks again about materiality. Just a reminder, we do not share that calculation with any of your members of the management team, nor with yourselves. There is a materiality threshold that is calculated for each opinion unit. So the bonds each have their own materiality calculation. The district, we have to calculate a separate one for each of your major funds, and then the government-wide. So we don't just have one number that we apply across. We do it on an opinion unit basis. Significant risks. So we're required to bring to you significant risks that we have already anticipated. This is not a complete list, but these are the big ones. Revenue recognition is a significant risk at on every single audit, no matter what type of entity you are. Are you recognizing your revenue appropriately? Are the funds being misappropriated? That's always something we have to think about. Long-term debt is one. Associated student body, of course, it's cash handling, and that's always one that is of high interest when it comes to the K-12 practice. Propo and Measure DD they have their own risks around them because of the nature of specific projects that the money needs to be spent upon, certain sites, etc. And then litigation and contingencies. And then there's one more on the following page that we've added, the in-force system conversion. This is a very unique situation this year where you've implemented this new system replacing a very archaic and bad system, and so we want to make sure that all of that was done properly, and we have been meeting with your team throughout that process as they've met with their consultants and specialists. So we are confident it will go well, but again, we will be bringing in our experts to make sure that it did. Independence considerations, it's kind of the hallmark or like the groundwork of our profession. We must be independent. And so we are communicating here and in writing that we are in fact independent. Our firm undergoes extensive processes to make sure our team members are independent of the district. Fraud risk discussion. At this point in time, we do not have any fraud that we are aware of or alleged fraud. And we would solicit feedback from you all if you were aware of anything to please bring that to our attention. All right. Accounting and auditing developments. I will not bore you with reading all of those paragraphs, but the next few paragraphs are audit standards that have come out that dictate how we conduct our audit. So these aren't necessarily things that your district is needing to do, but this is talking about more of our files, our documentation, how we rely on information. These are all new standards that our profession is required to follow. Kevin and I were just talking about this, we're pretty confident already that we've been following a lot of these because of the nature of we have a very large public company practice, so a lot of our standards are already holding us to a higher level. But this is bringing the rest of the profession up to date with those procedures and policies. And then last but not least, state compliance audit guide updates. The state is always thinking and adding to the audit guide. So here you can see what's been added for fiscal year 24. The Art and Music in Public Schools grant, Prop 28, that is now in the audit guide, and we have procedures that we will be required to follow. We've already been working with your management team about those, as the state had not included that in their initial draft of the audit guide at the beginning of the year. So we've been trying to make sure that we're keeping them apprised of what we are finding out through our position on the task force. The home to school transportation reimbursement, there are expanded procedures for that. It was in the audit guide last year, but they've expanded what we need to do. Educator effectiveness, again, it was in there last year, but now we have additional testing that we are required to now do. The expanded learning opportunities program is another big one. And then transitional kindergarten, which obviously would not apply to Sweetwater, but it is new to the audit guide. And that is it for our plan. Is there any questions, comments, or any insights to provide to us?
One quick question.
Yeah.
So all the financial statements you're going to be looking at will be generated from Infor?
Yes. We're excited about that. Truly, we are. I wasn't being sarcastic. We are excited about that. Question?
Do you have any timelines for when you'll be reporting back, or does it come in one big?
No, good
Presentation.
question. So we are scheduled to come back at your next quarterly meeting in July to report with just progress and where we are. If we ever had a concern throughout the process, we would not wait for that meeting. We would reach out directly to the committee chair, which would be you.
Okay.
So we always would have a direct line of communication to you if we needed it, as well as you would have a direct line of communication to us if you needed to reach out to us.
Okay. And I think you just mentioned it, but if you find issues, you won't wait until the next quarterly meeting. You'll be giving us some information right away. Huh?
Yes, so if it was something of a nature where we had concerns about issues with management or fraudulent concerns, we would reach out to you directly. If we had something where maybe there were some findings that we found, that wouldn't be something what we would reach out to you directly. Just wanted to make sure I'm clear about what kind of information, but yes.
Great, thank you. No questions here? Okay. Yep. Any
Right.
questions from you? No?
I think we're good.
State Assembly Office? No? Okay. Hey, thank you very much. I think you spelled it out in a very understandable manner, and we'll be watching and listening as you go through these audits. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr.
I can make-
Sacco?
If I can make a comment. So this is the item, because we were going to go to 2B, but we've asked to have our internal audit report regarding the fraud hotline be moved up. That was a request. So we're going to have Mr. Hughes and Ms. Carbuccio address that. If that's okay with the committee.
Absolutely.
Hi, good morning, or good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
As I'm sure you're aware, the Compliance Office and the Internal Audit Office monitors and responds to the fraud hotline through our third-party integrity counts. This is the quarterly report for the time period ending December 31st, 2023. As you can see, for the fiscal year, we've had 3 fraud hotline complaints, with 2 of them being closed by the Compliance Office and 1 being closed by the Office of Internal Audit. The most recent closure was actually past the December 31st date, but we put it on there just so you know that it's closed, which was January 9th, 2024. Compliance closed the 1 integrity counts report that we received in December with regard to a complaint about an employee and their activities in the workday. The other two were closed, one as a duplicate complaint, and the other was closed back in September by the compliance office.
And so as you can see, sometimes there are reports that are made, and you can see the reporter claim description. They may submit a complaint. It's really more of a complaint rather than a report of fraud. And so if you can see on the 3 items listed here, they all say non-fraud because they initially come in through this avenue, but then they get routed to the appropriate position in the district. So that's, I just did want to point out the
Thank
fact
you.
that sometimes we get information or complaints that are not necessarily of a fraudulent nature, but since they've come in, we do provide follow-up either through the compliance office, and I think our general counsel wants to add to that as well.
Yeah, I think when we passed this anonymous fraud hotline, we recognized that it was likely we would get complaints that were not related to fraud. And what do you do when you get a complaint? You don't get to just say, well, this isn't fraud, go away, right? I mean, it really is a process of customer service and a process of investigation. And that's why, as both of these divisions fall under legal at this time, really it does provide an opportunity for compliance to oversee the non-fraud related complaints, things that don't deal with money directly or misappropriation. And then Bob, like he does with just about everything else in his team, work with the school sites to take it on wherever it happens to fall, same as if they had filed it through the appropriate complaint procedure.
Gotcha. So on the one hand, people are submitting complaints. On the other hand, we're investigating to see what's up. And while there was no fraud, did you discover anything in terms of the business procedure that could have been improved? Service that could have been improved in some way?
I want to say the nature of the anonymity that's provided by the third party, like invites folks to give us non-fraud complaints, because the vast majority that we've seen over the years have been non-fraud complaints. The ones that we have investigated this year specifically have been unsubstantiated. The claims have either been misunderstandings, miscommunications, things like that. We haven't found anything where there's been a business practice that needed to be corrected or improved or take a corrective action at all for these 3 cases.
Okay. But in your process, you do look at business practices to
Absolutely.
make sure that they're not wasting money or valuable time, et
Absolutely.
cetera.
So the internal auditors look at the money aspects, right? And they look at those aspects that if they're taking on this because it is a true fraud complaint. In compliance, we look at all the ARs and BPs to say, was there any type of violation here by this behavior, this conduct by either an employee or a student?
Aside from this committee, are you broadcasting in some way the results of these investigations so people understand what the complaint was and not necessarily who against and so forth, but and how it was how the investigation came out?
Yeah, so the reporting actually goes to the complainant. So we receive it from the third party, we investigate, and then we provide the third party with our closeout memorandums.
Okay.
And those go to the complaining party. We also have the ability to ask questions and get clarifications from the complaining party. And we give them avenues for any type of appeal. Should it be some sort of AR or BP that includes an appellate right, we give them those avenues. But we don't, other than here, we don't report it out to any other groups.
No, I didn't mean that, broadcasting it necessarily, but if there's a lesson learned in it, perhaps something that
Right.
advises employees on how to do things without arousing concerns and
Yeah,
so
so
forth.
I'll give you an example. One of the common corrective actions we've taken when there has been a policy violation or something that needs to be remediated is that, for instance, we'll do a training with the affected folks around appropriate boundaries or things like that. So that would be an example where our office would step in and we would go and actually give a training to a group.
Gotcha.
And I think the other thing to really note, and while we don't see nearly as many on the actual fraud, the reason for this hotline, we don't see them coming on that side, is really looking at the differences between not necessarily efficiencies, as you're saying. I think a fraud complaint is fraud was committed. So there's lots of times we can look at whether something was a best practice or whether something is a good option for us to give a department or a division on how they're going to do something in the future. But I also think that it's really important that while we internally do that, Dr. Sockheld's team, or as we meet, like we're meeting with ASB advisors Wednesday, I think, to talk about practices and to give them training. The role here, just as I think our external auditors would say, is really to provide that support and that guidance to say, this is, is this a violation of the law? That's not really our common thing. That's what a fraud hotline says, is did you commit fraud? But what we're looking to do is, how do you ensure what you're doing is good for the community, but not in a mechanism where it's so ticky-tacky and so micromanagey that people don't want to do the job, right? Because as our friends at Crow have told us, right, there's that line up there about ASB. Our ASB folks are there to teach, and our kids are there to learn. And so how do we ensure that what we're doing is giving them the tools to do their job and to let kids do amazing things in an appropriate way and support that? Not to beat them down in such a manner that they don't want to participate. We're losing ASB advisors. So we have to balance that efficiencies issue with really is this a problem? And I know, Dr. Aguirre, you probably want to jump in.
Yeah, so that really is, I think, our approach and philosophy is to build capacity, because if you come in with that approach from more of a punitive approach, we've already had a challenge in some schools in having staff want to fill that ASB role. And again, especially at the middle schools and even at the high schools, where staff is there to teach, and then if you ask them how to be, in essence, accountants and keepers of the fisc, it becomes a challenge. And so for us, it's finding a balance point between really building that edification of understanding what's the expectation with providing service to kids and making sure you're doing it in a fiscally responsible manner. So I think that's the balance that we do try to strike.
Exactly. I think that ought to be the goal of any kind of a hotline per se, because fraud is probably not going to be happening by and large, but are people really getting along with each other? Are they communicating well? Are we doing our best to defray any kind of tension and get focused on what result we're looking for? And I think that both of you have explained that pretty well. And I hope that the folks out there understand that this isn't just a place where you write down a complaint and stick it in a box, that this is a tool where everybody can be part of solutions instead of just complaining or making assumptions about what people do or why they do it. So thank you. I think it's great. Okay, anything else? Terrific.
Questions?
I just had one. As a suggestion, I know the fraud hotline's just up there by itself, but if you put the other compliance reporting mechanisms along with it, it may give people a different option. Different avenue.
So don't put fraud in capital letters. This is a hotline to report various kinds of
Or
things. Yeah.
Title IX or whatever the complaint is.
And we do have that exactly on the front page, where we have a plethora of little buttons at the bottom where you can report bullying, and you can report a Title IX complaint, and you can report a discrimination complaint, so that finding how to complain in our district is much easier than it's ever been in the past.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then on to the next issue here. Is that 3 or 4? 4. We're back to.
I'll ask Dr. Sockeld to introduce this one. Dr.
Yes,
Sockeld.
so now we're back up to item 2B.
Okay, 2B.
So on this item here is just a snapshot of our ongoing and some of our completed audits. We've only got a few. It's the same that we reported last meeting. So we're in the process now of working on the school nutrition program. That's going to be reviewed here in the upcoming months. The team is pulling together information on the financial side, working very closely with the program. We have Eric Spann, who's the Director of Nutrition Services, leading that work. So we're helping complement that work in preparation for the review that's going to start around May. And then, so that's ongoing. So we anticipate probably soon after that, over the summer, perhaps the July meeting. Hopefully we have a report out that we can share then. Then this next item we have had on here for the last few meetings. It's our CalPERS report. It is complete. We've just been waiting to get a final report. And just as of just a few minutes ago, because we had sent another follow-up to the rep, And we did receive a communication that they anticipate having a report by the end of this week. So hopefully, maybe again by the next meeting we'll have that, but that'll make the official item closed. But we've already implemented all the corrective action plans. We've put that in place. AB 139, we have this here, as Crow team mentioned earlier. A lot of it's associated with the implementation of Infor. And so we did go live in July, but we still have another module with timekeeping and absence management that's going to go live in July. So we anticipate once that is complete, then we can officially take this one off the list as well. But that's in the works right now with that upcoming as well. And then, again, the next two items are related to what the Crow team shared earlier, just the work that we have for the 23-24. So it kind of aligns to the prior item on the agenda. Okay.
When do you think you'll have those Propo Measure DD audits completed?
So those will align with the work that we're doing district-wide. So those will be in the fall.
In the fall?
The November, December. So same thing, we'll bring them to the committee in December. All the financial reports will be brought at that time.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
I'd just like to add that I know we have several construction projects coming up, coming out of those funds. So we haven't had many in the past, the recent past. So I'm looking forward to that happening and upgrading our sites in fields and moving on from there. But so we'll have more reports to look at or to be audited this coming year. Thank you.
Terrific. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Yes.
So the only thing I did want to make mention of is that if you noted that, I think it was item 2 was the extraordinary audit. We're really at the back end of that, and by implementing Infor, we're looking forward to being able to close this one out. That I think is the last pending item on that extraordinary audit. And I think it points to why we want to be why we're so focused on being fiscally prudent. Because we learned a lot of painful lessons during that time. And because of that, I think we've been able to do things like position control, and we've been able to really be more focused on implementing this system and there was a lot of learnings that unfortunately were painful, but I think because of that, we are really on top of the budget process. And so I want to commend Dr. Sokol and the entire team that's here because it really, again, it's really important to learn the lessons and not just let the experience go by, and I think we did that. So I wanted to commend Dr. Sokol and her team.
And while since Infor is sort of on this docket, we were having some contract changes. And are you anticipating any more changes to the contract coming up between now and the end of this calendar year?
So I'll ask Dr. Sokol. I know that we do anticipate from time to time, because of the nature of our particular requirements, both for our district and at the state level, we have had those conversations with the Infor group. So we've had to have some amendments and change orders. At this point, we're kind of coming around the last modules that Dr. Sokol mentioned. So while we don't anticipate a huge variance, it is possible there may be some variance. I wouldn't want to say absolutely not, because that is a possibility. Having said that, I think our team's being very diligent so that we avoid the number of instances where we do get those change orders. Everyone, I use that term because it's common, but it could be amendments or whatnot. But Dr. Sokol, is there anything that you'd like to add on that question?
No, I think you've highlighted that well. I mean, we're continuing to complete the phase 1, which was that financial system part of it, along with our HR module, but now we're also transitioning what we're calling the phase 2, which is that timekeeping absence management. But as Dr. Geary mentioned, there are considerations that we look at once we start to implement that could possibly change that.
Boy, this is burrowing down to the most minute pieces of information, huh? You're wiggling in your chair. Is that because you're going to sleep there, or did you have a comment? I'm sorry, I don't mean to, but just in case that meant you had a comment you wanted to add. I do not. Okay, very good. All right, well, we'll keep an eye on that, and hopefully.
You want to denominate yourself?
You want to renominate yourself, man? And hopefully we don't have too many major changes, so my hair isn't on fire, you know, that's,
We will do our best.
thank you. And as if that's important at all. Anything else you want to add on part two?
No,
No,
from my standpoint.
we're good? We're good. All righty. And then C3 is a first interim board presentation. Is there on the financial status in the district?
Dr. Sacco?
So we bring this forward to the committee just as the highlight of what we've presented to the board. So back in December, we shared the first interim report. And as Mr. Gutowski mentioned about being on N4, this is what I also highlighted at that time. This was the first report that we were able to generate from this new system. So it was a lot of work on our finance team here that is with us to get that information, but we successfully did export a SACS report, which is what we submit to the county and to the state, and hence these numbers. And as you've heard me in the past say, this is at a point in time, so a lot of the information we were relying at the time was centered around the state adopted budget. But we did have a development which was related to our bargained agreements with our labor partners. So that was included here in the December 1st interim report. So as you can see, this is just kind of the particular slide that shows things side by side from adopted budget to first interim. So it did reflect a fund balance, I think if you scroll down a little bit, of where we're at about $103 million. And then if you go to the next slide, I mean, one consideration here for the committee and what I highlighted also in December is with some of our financial obligations, it does create a structural deficit when you look at that in the out years, and it'll be something that I'll continue to highlight, but we do have the reserves. And this is at this point in time during first interim, where we also do bring forward a certification of whether it's positive, qualified, or negative. We did bring forward a positive qualification because we do meet, based on the 3-year window, those obligations for those time periods. Although there's a structural deficit, but we're also relying on reserves during that time frame. We're in the process right now of preparing second interim, which is going to go to the board on Monday. At that point, we're going to have a little bit more information because we did have the governor release his January proposal for the 24-25 years, so those numbers change a little bit with our out years. But it's just something to keep in mind of what we have ahead of us. I mean, obviously, there'll be some decisions, but we are balanced at this point in time to meet those obligations.
And if I may, Dr. Salkel, I did want to just chime in here and kind of just point out one of the reasons that we have a structural deficit. There's lots of variables to that, but one of the things that is one of the major kind of variables in this equation is the declining enrollment. And because we have had such a strong decline in our enrollment, it means that it obviously impacts our revenues, and so we have to be very mindful. So while at this point we're confident we continue to have a positive budget certification, moving forward we will need to be looking at how do we adjust this across the district to ensure that we're aligning the different aspects of our district operations to that declining enrollment. To the fact that this year I believe it's close to 800, Dr. Salkel?
There, so I think to Dr. Gear, to your point there, you can highlight what side year over year, but then also we've compared it to what we thought budget development was during that time frame.
And so you can see the numbers in brackets, that's the amount of our decline in enrollment. And one thing I did want to emphasize, because a lot of times I think it can be a little bit tempting to think if we can just do one thing differently, it would help address this. And while we definitely make every effort from an outreach and marketing perspective, the bottom line is that really since the recession of 2007-8, we have seen a decline in the birth rate. So regardless of the program that you offer, it could be the best in the county, it could be the worst in the county, but the bottom line is there are simply less students in our region. And so because of that, we're seeing this across not just our district, but other districts as well. And so that's really starting to feed up. Now for us, the challenge is to offer the best program as possible to keep as many students in our district, but at the end of the day, there's simply less students across our region. And so how do we then adjust appropriately, understanding that generally in education it's very difficult to adjust downward because that is what we're seeing. We would hope to see at some point a stabilization of that decline in enrollment. We understand it's been a trend, then we understand a trend is only a trend until it's not. We don't see a point where it stabilizes. As you can see from the projections, they only seem to accelerate. So this year we had about a 846 student decline. Next year we anticipate a 920 student decline, and then eventually 1,051 student decline. So these trends are only, if anything, they're accelerating. So if we were to, in a hypothetical world where we would have stable enrollment, I think we'd be in a place where we could be very confident where we were. However, we have to continuously be making those adjustments because of the decline in enrollment. So it's kind of these, trying to make sure we're adjusting for this reality, given the very fixed nature of some of the operations that we have. So it's just something I wanted to highlight, because our finance team has done a wonderful team to make sure we have a very effective position control process, to make sure we are updating our system to be as effective as possible. And at some point, no matter how efficient you are, this declining enrollment is going to catch up to us. And we just need to be very mindful, very thoughtful, that we make these adjustments in a way that bring minimal amount of pain points across the district, because there will be pain points, and how do we manage those in a way that can be minimized and curtailed and mitigated is a focus that we have. And so when I heard what keeps you up at night is how can we bring more kids to our schools, that's one of those items, and there's just no way for us to really do that effectively. And so then we have to manage our budgets and our resources in a way that really reflect that. And that's a challenge, not just for us. We're seeing it in multiple districts in our county and really in the state, but that will be our challenge moving forward. I can't emphasize that enough. And it will be a challenge, and it will be an opportunity, and we can all across the district have conversations about that. But as you can see, the projections, adjust we must. So we will keep that in mind as we move forward.
Any other comments from anybody here on the dais? No.
On any part of the budget, I just had a question on the budget projections for general fund and restricted. And just looking over 2023, 2024 on the capitalized expenditures, I just noticed quite an increase, and I don't know what that's attributed to, if you don't mind. Yes, that one.
I don't know those numbers offhand. I probably have to pull that piece, but it's just internal, some of the things that we process. It could be ASBs, it could be some of that goes through the general fund. Just some in-house. It's separate and apart from the bond programs. It's things that we might be, probably one offhand right now is the vehicles and the buses. So we have some funds that we purchased, and that could be part of that as well. Those were a couple $1 million that we had.
And which line were you referring to again?
18.
Oh, capitalized,
Row
okay.
18.
All right. Thank you very much. Does that answer your question? Does that?
We can provide the information.
Okay,
We
thank
can
you.
provide you that information. We can follow up with the details.
Okay, and you'll provide copies to,
Yeah, we'll send it, we'll via Deanne to the board office and the.
terrific, thank you very much. And
Madam Chair, so I really appreciate your explanation of our thinking here and where we're at financially. And I remember when we were sitting online discussing this and thinking about this and being mindful of the money we had, the COVID dollars we had and have, and how we can best use those or hold those over, and for different reserves. And there was a lot of work and a lot of thought around that, and it's very strategic. And I really appreciate the job that and your leadership and the teams and all the work the team has done to so that we're still we're a structural deficit, but that's just where we're at right now, with the declining enrollment. And I wish there was something we could do, we could do, and you've been, the team and the district as a whole has been, marketing itself, a lot, but you're not gonna market yourself where you're gonna start, drawing 500 new students, in one swath back into the district, but I know we're doing a lot around it. What, I was gonna ask, what would be a ballpark number on 100 students financially, the financial loss on that?
So Dr. Sokol, I think, there's a kind of a rule of thumb, if you will.
I've been
that-
using about 15,000 because of the base grant and the supplemental grants, around 15,000
And that's per
per
student.
student.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so for every student, we receive approximately 15,000. So you just take that by a multiple of 100.
Yeah, and that's for a 9-month school year or annually?
Annual, yeah. It's an
Annual?
annual, it's an annual amount.
Okay.
What they apportion, yeah.
It's a good thing to keep in mind. Yeah, that's a good figure to keep in mind. Okay, anything more with regard to this particular issue? And we discussed fraud hotline, calendar of meetings. I know we've got, let's go to the videotape.
Okay, so Deanna, I believe this is a proposed schedule of meetings, if I'm correct?
Yes, this would be the proposed schedule based on the quarterly meetings, and the March meeting, we're tentative because we will have a new member next year. So hopefully when the new member comes on in December, we can verify that this date works for that person as well.
Okay, that's okay. And then the docket will probably be much the same, but where there are new developments, of course, we'll be discussing those at these meetings. And perhaps in the course of business, we will find ideas that we can bring in as well that perhaps haven't been discussed before. Okay, good deal. Any other comments on that?
I think on this one is where we ask you, as the members of the committee, if the calendar generally works for you, or if you're going to be out of town, out of the state, out of country. It would be. It's kind of what we're asking you. Does this work for you all?
Does it work for everybody here?
I think July I have a European adventure.
Oh, you
so,
do?
yeah,
Well.
yeah. But don't worry, you can. I'll just read the minutes afterwards.
Oh, okay. We could find you, though, if you've got a cell phone. You'll never be able to escape us.
I'll be in the vineyard.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, you might not be, able to make decisions that are legally binding. Okay, terrific. Huh?
Although we may not have a quorum that day, 'cause
That's true.
I have a work trip,
Oh, you do?
yeah, with my
In
boss out of
July 15th?
state.
Okay, so we're probably missing 2 people, so we might want to reschedule that
Reschedule it,
particular meeting. When is everybody back?
Good question.
Yeah, so you'll let us know and we can reschedule it, okay? So we'll make sure that we get that squared away here as soon as possible, so we don't have any outstanding questions about the calendar going forward. That's great.
Okay.
All righty. Reviewing the minutes from December 5th.
Oh, you have the
There's one more.
timeline?
There's one more. yeah.
Sorry, item
Oh,
6?
I'm sorry.
Timeline of district deadlines.
Oh, district deadlines, my. Okay.
It's just a
Dr.
recap,
Sokol?
just so that you see the recap of the items that we do district-wide from a statutory standpoint, so that way that the committee has this as a point of reference. We bring it forward every year, just as again, a guiding document of what's ahead. And a lot of some of these items tie back to what we present at the committee.
Thank you for calling me on that. I didn't, I saw the thing, but I didn't see the actual report. This is a good thing to have, and I'm sure it's someplace in this book that I didn't see, so I'm going to find it. If not, I can get a copy of it, right? Emailed to me. Right?
Yes, should be tab 6.
It's in here. There it is. There we go. I'm just checking to see if there's anything in July. No. Okay. Any comments from the committee members? No? No? Any recaps you folks would like to bring to us? We've got a new woman at the helm here at Crow to do our major audits, and I don't know, are you taking an extended vacation or?
I think I want to join him.
Yeah, in a vineyard someplace, out of the country.
Ms. Emerald, going
yeah.
back to the minutes?
Yeah.
If we could just get consensus from the subcommittee that the minutes are okay?
Okay. Those in favor of accepting these minutes, please indicate.
Yes, sounds good.
Okay, okay, very good.
Thank you.
I think that we're unanimous there. Thank you very much, and I'll catch on, I promise.
Okay.
Any other committee comments, committee member comments? about the Herculean task that lies before us to continue offering the highest quality of education with acknowledgement, shrinking budgets because of a shrinking enrollment. And we are working as a board to find ways to attract more students to this district. And if people knew all that was being offered here, I think that parents might reconsider where they send their kids to school because there's a lot going on. Great programs that will help kids make a transition to college, help young people make decisions about careers that they might, career paths they might want to follow. And I know that through the district's machine, including our public relations people, media contacts, all the folks who are in the community, that we I think, have a great product here. And we can't be shy about telling people about it because, quite honestly, our district depends upon it. We have to tell the good news, and then we have to follow through. And I think that we're there. We just have to take that next step and just be a little more out there in the public, letting people know that they've got an excellent school district here, staffed by wonderful teachers, offering great opportunities to not just learn in the classroom, but learn in environments where they could get to know a profession and perhaps pursue that profession and create some very promising careers for themselves. So we've got a lot going on here. We have to tweak some of these issues that are impacting our ability to write checks and pay for the excellent education we're offering to the public. Any other comments from anybody here?
Could I add something real quick?
Yes, ma'am.
If I may. Back to Committee Member Schmidt's inquiry on the financial statement. I had staff already respond back to me on that $9 million. A good portion of that is out of the LCAP. We have about $5 million that was set aside for security purposes for the installation of security cameras. And then we also have a portion that was out of the general fund that we earmarked for other miscellaneous type of deferred maintenance, other type of items that we're doing like flooring or other kind of items that have been set aside for that out of the general fund. So it's primarily those two items.
Is that the balance of that $9 million?
It was part of that $9 million.
Okay, so close to $4 million for other projects, or what?
$5 million out of the LCAP specifically for the security cameras and installation, and then the balance around for other projects to get us to close to almost that $10 million.
Okay, terrific. Does that answer your question? All right. Are there any other matters that anybody would like to bring up before we call an adjournment to this meeting?
I just want to make a comment, more of a reflection. I think Kevin may have alluded to this at the beginning. The fact that this meeting is really following a regular course of business, for those of us who were here when it was not a regular course of business, I think it speaks to the volume, it really speaks volumes to the work that's happened in the finance department, but really across the district. So the more we can get to a regular course of business and it's not an extraordinary course of business, I think reflects the fact that we're getting back on that path. We're almost there with the implementation of Infor, but it really is such a marked change from where some of us began this work. And so I want to appreciate the work that's happened there. And we couldn't have done this without our audit partners. To a degree, it feels like they took a little bit of a chance on coming in when they did to work with us. It was a challenge. I remember that. And not only did we have that pandemic, we had the financial situation we needed to right that ship. So I want to say thank you, Kevin, as you ride off into the sunset, wherever that may be. I really appreciate the work because it was somewhat of a chance, and hopefully our team has really come through in a way that makes all of us proud and in a way that we can stand by the work. So thank you for that.
Right. Thank you very much. And unless there is other business, Mr. Segura has handed me this. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.